Manhattan's most powerful gathered for the year's most exclusive gala. Then the door opened, and a 12-year-old black girl walked in. Second-hand dress, worn-out shoes, a crumpled invitation trembling in her hand. Around her neck, a tarnished silver pendant, a half moon. A woman in diamonds spotted her face twisted.
Security, get this filthy little street rat out before she stinks up the room. This is a gala, not a garbage dump. Things like her don't deserve to breathe the same air as us.
Silence. The girl's fingers closed around her pendant, the only thing from whoever abandoned her at a fire station 12 years ago. But across the room, billionaire Ellison Hargrove's hand began shaking. He stared at the pendant. His glass slipped and shattered. He had not seen that necklace in 12 years, and no one on earth should have it. Why does this girl have it? Who is she? And what secret has been buried for 12 years? Yeah, whatever that is, it's not a coincidence. Let's see what happens next. Her name was Zuri Okafor, 12 years old, born, as far as anyone knew, on a freezing January night in 2014. That was the night someone wrapped her in a thin blanket, pinned a silver necklace inside, and left her on the steps of Engine 74 fire station in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn. No name, no note. Just a scrap of expensive linen paper tucked beside her tiny body. Rain had smeared most of the ink. Only 3 words survived. Forgive me, Orion. The firefighters called 911. A social worker came, and Zuri entered the system, the long, cold maze of foster care that swallows children whole and sometimes never lets them out. She bounced between 3 homes before she turned 4. The first family returned her like a package. The second forgot her birthday. The third didn't last 6 months. Then came Dorothea Simmons. Everyone called her Dot. 71 years old. Retired school cafeteria worker, arthritis in both hands, a heart so big it made up for everything her wallet couldn't cover. Dot had fostered 11 children over 30 years. Zuri was the last. Their apartment in Brownsville was small, 2 rooms, peeling paint, a kitchen window that didn't close all the way. When Dot's disability check ran short, Zuri ate cereal for dinner. She washed her one good dress in the bathtub for picture day. She never complained, not once. But Zuri was not a sad girl. She was a quiet fire. She read 2 grade levels above her classmates. She carried a composition notebook everywhere. Not a diary, but something sharper. She wrote observations, facts, evidence. Once, she documented every code violation in her building. Cracked pipes, broken smoke detectors, mold in the stairwell, and slipped the notebook under a city inspector's door. The building got repaired within a month. Nobody knew it was her. Zuri trusted facts. Facts didn't abandon you at fire stations. Facts didn't look at your skin and decide you didn't belong. And the biggest fact of Zuri's life was the necklace. She had studied it 1,000 times. The silver was old, but the craftsmanship was extraordinary. Too fine for a cheap street market, too detailed for a machine. The half moon was smooth on one side, textured on the other. The constellation was precise. Someone who knew the stars had designed this. And the garnet was real. She had tested it once with a library book about gemstones. Real garnet, set into the metal by a skilled hand. This necklace was not cheap. This necklace was not random. Someone with money, someone with knowledge, someone with love had made this, and then left it with a baby in the cold. Why? That question lived inside Zuri like a second heartbeat. Now, the man whose glass shattered on the marble floor. The newspapers called him the conscience of corporate America. 62 years old, founder of Hargrove Dynamics, a green energy empire worth $14 billion. His face appeared on magazine covers. He donated to hospitals, schools, water projects across 3 continents. He shook hands with presidents. But behind the penthouse door on Central Park West, Ellison Hargrove was a hollow man. There was a room in his apartment that stayed locked. Pale yellow walls. A crib that had been used exactly once. On the dresser, a framed sonogram curling at the edges. And beside it, an empty velvet jewelry box. The lid was engraved with a constellation, Orion. 12 years ago, Ellison had loved a woman named Adaeze Okafor. She was Nigerian-American, a public health researcher. Brilliant, warm, unafraid. She laughed with her whole body. She loved the stars, Orion most of all. She used to say the constellations were ancestors keeping watch. Adaeze became pregnant. Ellison was overjoyed. He commissioned a jeweler in Antwerp, a master craftsman named Peter Voss, to create a one-of-a-kind pendant for his unborn daughter. A half moon, the Orion constellation. One star replaced by a garnet, Adaeze's birthstone. There was no other necklace like it on Earth, but Adaeze never saw it. 3 days after giving birth at a private clinic upstate, she was dead. The official record said cardiac arrest, and the baby, their baby, simply vanished. No discharge papers, no transfer record, nothing. Ellison searched. He hired investigators. He spent millions. Every trail ended in silence. And then someone told him to stop. Someone close to him. Someone powerful enough to make a billionaire afraid. He stopped. For 12 years, he locked that nursery door and tried to forget. He built his empire higher. He smiled wider on camera. And every single night, he sat alone and stared at an empty velvet box. Until tonight. Until a girl in a second-hand dress walked into his gala wearing the necklace he made for a ghost. Ellison's shattered glass still glittered on the marble floor. But the real question, the one now cutting through his chest like broken crystal, was not about the necklace. It was about the girl. Who told him to stop searching? What were they hiding? And what will happen now that he has seen, with his own eyes, proof that his daughter may be alive? The answers are closer than he thinks, but so is the danger. Hold on, let that sink in. This man designed that necklace 13 years ago. Now it's on a random girl at his own party. What would you do? Rush over? Call the cops? Or freeze because you're terrified the answer might destroy everything you thought you knew? The gala ended. The guests left. The waiters swept up the broken glass. But Ellison Hargrove did not move. He stood in the empty lobby, staring at the spot where the girl had been. His chief of staff, Margot Tan, touched his arm. "Ellison, you're scaring me. What happened?" He didn't answer her question. Instead, he asked one of his own. "The girl, the one they tried to throw out. I need her name." Margot frowned. "She was just a kid from some school program. Why does it matter?" "It matters more than anything I've done in 12 years. That night, Ellison sat alone in his penthouse. He opened the locked room for the first time in months. The nursery air was stale and still. The crib, the sonogram, the empty velvet box. He picked up the box and ran his thumb across the engraved constellation on its lid. Orion, the same pattern he had seen tonight, hanging around the neck of a child he didn't know. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in 4 years. Otieno Marshall answered on the third ring. His voice was cautious. "Ellison, it's been a long time." "I saw it, Otieno. The necklace. It exists." Silence on the other end. "It was on a girl, black, about 12 years old. She was at my gala tonight." Otieno Marshall was a private investigator, 53, meticulous, patient, sharp. He worked out of a cluttered office in Harlem, filled with cold case files and empty coffee cups. He was the last investigator Ellison had hired, and the only one who hadn't taken the money and disappeared. 4 years ago, Ellison had called him and said, "Stop looking." Otieno had argued. Ellison had insisted. The case went cold. Now it was burning again. "You told me to stop," Otieno said quietly. "I was wrong. Someone made me stop. I won't let that happen again." Otieno agreed, and by morning he was already pulling threads. First, the guest list. He accessed the Hargrove Foundation's gala records and traced the girl's invitation back to PS 298, a public school in Brownsville, Brooklyn. The school had received 2 student invitations from the foundation. One went to a boy in 6th grade. The other went to a girl named Zuri Okafor, awarded for outstanding community spirit. Zuri Okafor. Otieno wrote the name down and circled it twice. He visited the school the next day. He posed as an evaluator from a literacy nonprofit. Clipboard, lanyard, practice smile. He observed Zuri from across the cafeteria during lunch. She sat alone, reading. The composition notebook was open beside her tray, and around her neck, catching the fluorescent light, the pendant. He photographed it with a telephoto lens from the hallway. Back at his office, he compared the image to the original design sketches Ellison had given him years ago. The half moon, the constellation, the garnet, every detail matched. This was not a copy. This was not a coincidence. This was the necklace. Next, Zuri's file. Otieno had a contact at ACS, the Administration for Children's Services. He called in a favor. The file arrived encrypted, and when he opened it, he understood why. It was thin, almost too thin for a child who had been in the system for 12 years. Her intake record from Engine 74 listed almost nothing. Infant, black female, approximately 3 days old, found with a blanket and personal item. Necklace. Note attached, partially illegible. No medical history from birth. No maternal information. No father listed. Nothing about where she came from or how she got to that fire station. For a baby left in one of the largest cities in the world, the paper trail was suspiciously clean. Someone had made sure there was nothing to find. But Otieno was the kind of man who found things anyway. He tracked down the intake officer from that night, Sergeant Ruth Ann Vickers. She had processed Zuri at Engine 74 12 years ago, retired now, living in a small house on Staten Island with 2 cats and a garden she tended like a confession. He knocked on her door on a Tuesday afternoon. She opened it with a look that said she had been expecting someone like him for a long time. He showed her the photograph of the pendant. Her face changed. The color drained from her cheeks like water from a cracked glass. "I remember that necklace," she said. "I remember that baby." She invited him inside, made tea. Her hands trembled as she poured. 3 days after we found the baby, a man came to the station. Expensive coat, black car waiting outside. He had paperwork, official-looking forms, typed, stamped. He said he was authorized to collect the child. "Did you release her?" "Almost." Ruth Ann set her cup down. Something felt wrong. The paperwork was too perfect, and the way he talked about the baby, like she was a package, not a person. So I told him I needed to call my captain first. I turned around to pick up the phone. When I turned back, he was gone. "Can you describe him?" Ruth Ann closed her eyes. 12 years fell away. Tall, white, thin lips, cold eyes, and a ring, a gold signet ring, on his right hand. It had a letter on it. She paused. The letter, H. Otieno's breath stopped. The Hargrove family signet ring. Every male member of the dynasty wore one. Ellison had stopped wearing his the day Adeze died, but his older brother Cordell Hargrove, the man who controlled the family trust, the man who had told Ellison to stop searching, Cordell never took his off. Otieno thanked Ruth Ann. He walked to his car. He sat behind the wheel for a full minute before starting the engine. Then he called Ellison. "I found the thread," he said, "but I need to warn you. It leads somewhere you're not going to want to go. It leads inside your own family." Ellison was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady and cold, the voice of a man who had just decided that nothing would stop him. Not money, not power, not blood. Follow it. But Otieno didn't know that someone was already watching. Someone who had been watching since the night of the gala. And that someone had just made a phone call of their own to a man with cold eyes and a gold signet ring. The search had begun, but so had the war. To understand what happened to Zuri, you must first understand the man who made her disappear. Cordell Hargrove was 68 years old. He had never built anything in his life. He had never invented, created, or risked a single dollar of his own. What Cordell did was control. He controlled the Hargrove Family Trust, a $6 billion fortress of investments, real estate, political donations, and generational power. He controlled who got in and who got out. He controlled the family name the way a man controls a locked vault, with keys only he possessed. Cordell did not scream. He did not threaten. He never needed to. He simply decided things, and the world rearranged itself around his decisions. 12 years ago, Cordell had decided that Adeze Okafor did not belong. It was not personal. That was the worst part. Cordell did not hate Adeze. He did not know her well enough to hate her. What he hated was what she represented, a disruption to bloodline, to legacy, to the pristine architecture of a family he had spent his entire life protecting. When Ellison told him about the pregnancy, Cordell said nothing. He smiled. He congratulated his younger brother. And that same evening, he made 3 phone calls. The first was to the family's attorneys. The second was to a private clinic in Dutchess County, Greenfield Private Clinic, where Adeze would later give birth. The third was to the clinic's lead physician, Dr. Niles Pemberton, who also happened to be Cordell's personal doctor for the past 15 years. Nobody knows exactly what was said in that third call, but what happened next speaks for itself. Adeze Okafor gave birth to a healthy baby girl on January 14th, 2014. The delivery was smooth. The baby cried immediately. Strong lungs, perfect vitals. Adeze held her daughter for the first time and whispered something into her ear that no one else heard. 3 days later, Adeze was dead. The official cause of death listed on her certificate was cardiac arrest. But cardiac arrest is not a cause. It is a result. Every heart stops eventually. The question is why. The real answer was postpartum hemorrhage. Adeze began bleeding heavily on the evening of January 16th. A nurse named Harriet Loomis identified the hemorrhage immediately and prepared a blood transfusion. The procedure was routine. The treatment was available. Adeze Okafor should have survived. But Dr. Pemberton told Harriet to wait. He said the family had concerns about the mother's prognosis and wanted to discuss options. Harriet waited. 10 minutes, 20, 30. She asked again. Pemberton told her to stand by. At the 40-minute mark, Harriet begged him to act. By then, Adeze had lost too much blood. She died at 11:47 p.m. She was 31 years old. And the baby? The baby with no name yet? The baby who had been alive and healthy and crying in her mother's arms just hours before? Vanished from the clinic by morning. No discharge record, no transfer paperwork, no trace. Pemberton told the staff the family had collected the infant privately. Nobody questioned it. Nobody asked. That was Cordell's gift. He created situations where nobody asked. Ellison was told that Adeze died from sudden cardiac failure. Tragic, unpredictable, no one's fault. He was told the baby had been transferred to a family care facility and that paperwork was being processed. He waited. He called. He was told to be patient. Days turned to weeks. Weeks turned to months. The paperwork never came. The facility didn't exist. By the time Ellison understood that his daughter was truly gone, the trail was ice cold. He hired investigators. He searched. And then Cordell visited him. Not with threats, but with something worse. Compassion. Brother, Cordell said, sitting in Ellison's living room with a glass of scotch, you're destroying yourself. The child is gone. A daisy is gone. I know it hurts, but some losses you have to accept, or they'll eat you alive. And Ellison, grief-broken, exhausted, trusting the only family he had left, believed him. He stopped searching. That was 12 years ago. And for 12 years, the silence held, until now. Because Otieno Marshall was not a man who gave up. And now he was digging in places Cordell thought were buried forever. But Cordell had eyes everywhere, and he was already moving. 3 days after Otieno visited Sergeant Vickers, something strange happened at Zuri's apartment. A social worker appeared at Dot Simmons' door, unannounced. Her name was Genevieve Pratt. Clipboard, gray suit, a smile that never reached her eyes. Routine wellness check, she said. Dot had passed every foster care inspection for 30 years. She knew what the routine looked like. This was not routine. Genevieve Pratt walked through the apartment, noting every crack in the ceiling, every expired item in the refrigerator, every scuff on the floor. She checked the bathroom, she opened closets, she photographed the kitchen. Then she sat down with Zuri. Her voice was soft, the kind of softness designed to make a child say things she shouldn't. Are you happy here, sweetheart? Do you feel safe? Is there anything you wish you could tell someone? Zuri looked at her with the steady gaze of a girl who had survived the system long enough to recognize its weapons. I'm fine, Zuri said. Dot takes care of me. After Genevieve left, Dot sat at the kitchen table with her hands shaking. She had seen this before, with other foster children in other years. An unscheduled visit, a suspicious report, and then the child was gone, relocated, transferred, lost in the paperwork. Something's not right, Dot said quietly. Somebody sent that woman. She was correct. The wellness check had been ordered through a casework override, a rarely used administrative tool that bypasses normal scheduling. It required sign-off from the ACS Deputy Commissioner's office, and the Deputy Commissioner's wife sat on the board of the Hargrove Family Trust. Cordell was not trying to hurt Zuri. He was trying to move her, somewhere far away, somewhere no one would think to look. A group facility upstate, a different name, a closed file. He had done it before. 12 years ago, he made a baby disappear. Now, he was preparing to make the girl disappear too. But he didn't know something. He didn't know that Zuri Okafor kept a composition notebook. He didn't know she documented everything, names, dates, details. And on the night of Genevieve Pratt's visit, Zuri opened that notebook and wrote, Unscheduled visit, social worker, Genevieve Pratt. Badge number 4471. Did not call ahead. Checked fridge, closets, bathroom. Asked if I felt safe. Dot is scared. Something is wrong. Zuri didn't know who was coming for her. She didn't know why. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was not going to disappear without a fight. And somewhere in Harlem, Otieno Marshall stared at a police sketch of a man with thin lips, cold eyes, and a gold signet ring with the letter H. He knew that face. The question was no longer who took Ellison's daughter. The question now was far more dangerous. How far would that person go to keep the truth buried? The answer was already on its way. Ellison sat in Otieno's office at 2 a.m. Photographs, financial records, and a police sketch covered the desk. The face on the sketch stared up at them. Thin lips, cold eyes, a signet ring. It's Cordell, Ellison said. Not a question. Otieno nodded. Everything points to him. The clinic, the doctor, the man at the fire station, the wellness check on Zuri. The override traces back to your family's trust. Ellison pressed his palms against his eyes. His brother. His own brother had taken his daughter and then sat across from him with scotch, telling him to move on. What do I do? Two choices, Otieno said. Go public now, but without hard proof, his lawyers bury you. Or we build the case, witness by witness, record by record. And when we have everything, we don't just expose him, we destroy his ability to fight back. And Zuri, if he's trying to move her, that's why we have to be fast and careful. Speed without strategy gets the girl taken. Strategy without speed gives him time. A razor's edge. They had to walk it perfectly. But Ellison was not the only one searching. In the Brownsville Public Library, Zuri sat before a flickering desktop computer. She had searched for her necklace before, dozens of times over the years. Silver moon necklace, Orion pendant, garnet star necklace, always dead ends. But tonight she searched differently. The man at the gala had changed something, the way he looked at her pendant, not with curiosity, but with recognition. He knew it. She typed, Orion constellation garnet pendant, one-of-a-kind commission. Page after page of useless results. Jewelry stores, astrology blogs. She clicked through to page 6. And there, a small article from Antwerp Diamond Monthly, dated November 2013. A profile of a master jeweler named Peter Voss. In the 7th paragraph, Voss described one commission that stood apart. A half-moon pendant featuring the Orion constellation. The client requested one star be replaced by a Mozambique garnet, the birthstone of someone he loved. He said it was for his unborn daughter. The client's name wasn't mentioned, but the article included a photograph, a design sketch in Voss's own hand. Zuri looked at the screen, then down at her chest. The same half moon, the same stars, the same garnet. Identical. She printed the page with trembling hands, folded it into her composition notebook, and wrote, Someone made this for me before I was born. Someone wanted me. For 12 years, she had believed she was abandoned, thrown away. Now, in a single paragraph written by a jeweler in Belgium, that belief cracked down the middle. She was not discarded. She was taken. While Zuri rewrote the story of her own life, Otieno drove north toward Vermont. He had found the missing witness, Harriet Loomis, the nurse on duty the night Adeze died, 58 now, living under a different name outside Burlington. She had left medicine in 2014 and never returned. He found her in a greenhouse, repotting lavender. When she saw him, soil spilled from her gloves. I'm not who you think I am, she said. I think you're Harriet Loomis, and I think you've been waiting 12 years for someone to find you. He showed her the photograph of Zuri, then the pendant. Harriet's hand went to her mouth. Tears broke through all at once. She's alive, she whispered. Oh God, she's alive. She talked for 2 hours without stopping. 12 years of silence collapsed. She described the hemorrhage, how she identified it immediately, how the transfusion was ready, how Pemberton told her to wait. She described the 40 minutes she stood in that hallway, watching through glass as Adeze's life drained away. She described the phone call, Pemberton in the corridor speaking low. The mother is gone. What do you want done with it? He called the baby it. She described the next morning, the empty bassinet, Pemberton's explanation that the family collected the child, and the check, $200,000 in a plain envelope. He said it was severance. I knew what it was. Silence money. I took it and disappeared. I have not slept a full night in 12 years. Do you know who Pemberton was talking to on the phone? I didn't hear the name, but 2 weeks later, I saw a magazine profile of the Hargrove family. I recognized the voice, the older brother, Cordell. Otieno recorded everything, but the trail didn't end with Harriet. Someone had physically moved the baby from the clinic. Pemberton needed a handler. Her name was Lenora Hale, listed profession, private family placement consultant. In reality, She was a broker who made children disappear for wealthy clients. No paperwork, no questions. Lenora died in 2019, but her records survived in a storage unit in Hoboken. Otieno found them through Lenora's estranged sister, who handed over the key without hesitation. Inside, filing cabinets of case folders, each folder a child, each child erased. One folder was labeled Hargrove, January 2014. 3 documents inside. An intake form describing a newborn black female, 3 days old. A set of typed instructions directing permanent placement outside the family's geographic and social sphere. And a letter on Hargrove Family Trust letterhead authorizing private placement of minor child. Designation, Hargrove. The signature did not belong to Cordell. It belonged to Vivian Hargrove, Ellison's ex-wife. The conspiracy was not one man. It was a family. But here is the part no one planned for. Lenora received the baby with instructions to place her far away. But when she looked at the child, she saw a black infant. And in her network of wealthy, discreet clients, not one would accept a black baby. She panicked. She couldn't return the child to Cordell. She couldn't use legal channels. So she drove to Brooklyn, found the nearest fire station, and on a freezing January night, wrapped the baby in a blanket and left her on the steps of Engine 74. But she pinned the necklace inside. Even Lenora Hale could not steal the last thing a dead mother's love had touched. The necklace survived because of one woman's flicker of guilt. The baby survived because a firefighter heard crying in the cold. Otieno called Ellison that night. His voice was heavier, as though the truth had aged him in a single day. I found everything. The nurse, the broker, the records. I know what happened to your daughter. And Ellison, it wasn't just Cordell. Who else? A long pause, the kind that holds a grenade. Vivian, your ex-wife signed the order. Silence. Manhattan glittered outside the penthouse window. Inside, the air turned to stone. 2 people he had trusted, 2 people he had loved. Together, they stole his child, let her mother die, and buried the truth for 12 years. Now the truth was out of the ground, and it was hungry. But Cordell had just received a phone call too. The nurse had talked. The storage unit had been opened. The investigator had everything. The war was no longer coming. It had arrived. And the next move would determine whether Zuri Okafor would finally be found or lost forever. Cordell Hargrove had survived 68 years by following one rule. Never leave a witness who can hurt you. Witnesses could be paid. Witnesses could be frightened. And if neither worked, witnesses could be discredited so thoroughly that no one would believe a word they said. He had 3 days. 3 days since his source inside ACS told him that Otieno Marshall had accessed Zuri's foster file. 3 days since he learned the storage unit in Hoboken had been opened. 3 days to dismantle everything before it reached the light. He moved fast. His attorneys filed a motion to seal Zuri's foster records, citing privacy concerns for the minor child. He sent a private security team to Harriet Loomis's address in Vermont, but she was already gone. Otieno had moved her to a safe location the same night she gave her testimony. Cordell's team found an empty house, a greenhouse full of lavender, and nothing else. He pressured Dr. Pemberton to leave the country. Pemberton booked a flight to Zurich. He made it as far as the airline lounge at JFK before 2 men in dark suits sat down across from him. Federal agents. The Manhattan DA's office had flagged his passport 12 hours earlier, based on an anonymous tip from someone inside Otieno's network. Pemberton was not arrested, not yet, but he was told, very politely, that leaving the country at this time would be inadvisable. He canceled his flight and sat in the lounge for an hour, staring at his hands. The hands that had waited 40 minutes while a woman bled to death. Meanwhile, Ellison was building something Cordell couldn't dismantle, a coalition. It started with Otieno's evidence. Every document, every recording, Every photograph was copied 3 times and stored in 3 separate locations: Otieno's office safe, a secure digital vault maintained by his attorney, and a sealed envelope held by a retired judge. That judge was Constance Adeyemi, 70 years old, former family court justice, and the closest friend of Adeze Okafor's late mother. Judge Adeyemi had known Adeze since she was a child. She had watched her grow into a brilliant researcher. She had mourned her death, and she had always suspected that the official story was a lie. When Ellison came to her with the evidence, she did not cry. She did not rage. She sat very still, read every page, and then said 5 words: "It is time for justice." Together, they assembled the dossier. 6 pieces of evidence, each one a nail in a coffin. First, Harriet Loomis's sworn affidavit describing Pemberton's deliberate delay and Adeze's preventable death. Second, the financial records linking Pemberton's $750,000 payment to a shell company controlled by the Hargrove Family Trust. Third, Lenora Hale's case file, including the signed instruction letter on trust letterhead. Fourth, Sergeant Ruth Ann Vickers' statement about the man with the gold signet ring who tried to collect Zuri from the fire station. Fifth, the ACS casework override that triggered Zuri's suspicious wellness check, traced to the Deputy Commissioner's office. Sixth, Peter Voss, the Antwerp jeweler, who provided a notarized statement confirming he made exactly one such pendant, commissioned by Ellison Hargrove in October 2013. 6 witnesses, 6 documents, 6 threads that wove together into a single, unbreakable rope. Ellison made a decision. He did not consult his board. He did not warn his attorneys. He did not give Cordell time to prepare. He leaked the entire dossier to 3 journalists simultaneously, one at the New York Times, one at ProPublica, and one at a Black investigative podcast called Unearthed. The story broke on a Tuesday morning under the headline, "The Hargrove Erasure: How a Billionaire Dynasty Allegedly Made a Black Woman and Her Baby Disappear." By noon, the world was on fire. The article laid out the evidence in precise, devastating detail. Adeze's preventable death, the falsified medical record, the baby was handed to a broker, the necklace, the fire station, the 12 years of silence. Social media detonated. The hashtag Justice for Zuri trended nationally within 3 hours. By evening, it was international. Strangers shared the story, calling it one of the most touching stories they had ever heard, a real-life story that exposed the darkest corners of wealth and power. The Manhattan DA's office announced a criminal investigation into the circumstances of Adeze Okafor's death. The New York State Medical Board suspended Dr. Pemberton's license pending review. ACS launched an internal audit of the casework override system that had been used to target Zuri. Hargrove Dynamics stock dropped 11% in pre-market trading. Cordell released a statement through his attorney. He called the allegations fabricated and racially motivated attacks against a family that is given generously to communities of all backgrounds. But the evidence was too deep, too documented, too corroborated by witnesses who had nothing to gain and everything to lose. And then came Vivian. Ellison's ex-wife had been silent since the story broke. She had locked herself in her Connecticut estate, refused calls from journalists, and instructed her housekeeper to say she was traveling abroad. But on Wednesday evening, Vivian Hargrove walked into the Manhattan DA's office with her own attorney and asked to make a statement. She did not deny signing the letter. She did not claim ignorance. What she said was worse because it was honest. Cordell came to me after he found out about the pregnancy. He said the child would destroy the family. He said Ellison's reputation, the trust, our son's inheritance, everything would be compromised. He offered me $400 million in a divorce settlement if I cooperated. I signed the letter. I did not ask what would happen to the baby. I did not want to know. She paused. Her voice did not break. It was flat. the voice of a woman describing something she had buried so deep it no longer felt like memory. I told myself I was protecting my children, my sons, their future, but I knew. On some level, I always knew. A woman died, a baby disappeared, and I looked away because looking away was easier than losing everything. The DA's office recorded every word. Vivian's statement became the seventh piece of evidence, and perhaps the most damning, because it came not from an investigator or a whistleblower, but from inside the conspiracy itself. Now, it was time for the last step, the one Ellison had been waiting 12 years to take. On a Thursday evening, he drove to Brownsville. No driver, no security, just a man in a wrinkled shirt carrying a manila folder. He knocked on Dot Simmons' door. Dot opened it. She looked at him for a long moment. This white billionaire standing in a hallway that smelled of old paint and cooking oil. Behind her, Zuri sat at the kitchen table, her composition notebook open. Judge Adeyemi arrived minutes later as a neutral witness. Ellison sat across from Zuri. He opened the folder. Inside, the jeweler's original sketch, the matching pendant design, the note found in her blanket. "Forgive me, Orion." "Your mother's name was Adeze," he said quietly. "She was a researcher. She was brilliant. She loved the stars, Orion most of all. She used to say the constellations were ancestors keeping watch." Zuri looked at the sketch, looked at her pendant, looked at this man with red eyes and trembling hands. "She loved you before you took your first breath, and I have been looking for you since the night you were taken from me." The room was very still. Dot pressed a hand over her mouth. Judge Adeyemi blinked hard. Zuri stared at Ellison for a long time. Then she asked one question, quiet, steady, precise. The question of a girl who had spent 12 years learning not to trust easy answers. "If you were looking, why didn't you find me?" The question cut through the room like a blade. Ellison opened his mouth. No sound came out, because the honest answer, the answer that burned in his chest, was the one he could barely say aloud. "Because I let them stop me, and I will never forgive myself for that." Zuri held his gaze. She did not reach for him. She did not cry, but something shifted behind her eyes. A wall, 12 years thick, developing its first crack. A court-ordered DNA test had been scheduled for Monday, but Cordell's attorneys had already filed an emergency motion to block it, arguing that Ellison's mental fitness should be evaluated before any paternity proceedings moved forward. The truth was out, but the fight for Zuri was far from over. And the courtroom battle ahead would be the most brutal of all. Manhattan Family Court, Part 12. 9 o'clock on a Monday morning. The courtroom was standing room only. Press filled the gallery. Notebooks, cameras, microphones pointed at the bench like weapons. Behind them sat community leaders, advocates, mothers holding their children a little tighter. Dot Simmons sat in the second row in her best church dress, hands folded in her lap, back straight as a hymn. Zuri sat beside her. She wore the pendant over a clean white shirt. She did not hide it. She had never hidden it. On one side of the courtroom, Ellison Hargrove and his attorney, Camille Osei Mensah. Camille was 44, sharp, precise, unflappable. She had left a 7-figure corporate law career to do pro bono family rights work, and she had never once regretted it. She carried a single binder. Inside that binder was everything. On the other side, Cordell Hargrove's legal team, led by Whitford Keene, $2,000 an hour. 3 junior associates behind him, a table stacked with motions, objections, and procedural delays designed to do one thing, slow the truth down long enough to suffocate it. The hearing was nominally about DNA testing authorization. Cordell's team had filed an emergency motion to block the test, arguing that Ellison was emotionally compromised and that the entire case was built on hearsay, circumstantial artifacts, and the manipulation of a vulnerable minor. Judge Rebecca Thornton, 22 years on the bench, known for her patience and her refusal to tolerate theatrics, read the motion aloud. Then she set it down and looked at both tables. Counselors, I've read the filings. I'm going to hear arguments, and I'm going to warn both sides. This is a courtroom, not a stage. Proceed. Whitford Keene stood first. He was smooth, decades of practice at making ugly things sound reasonable. He argued that the pendant was circumstantial at best, that Harriet Loomis was a disgraced former nurse seeking attention, and that the entire case had been constructed by a grieving man who has projected his loss onto a child who bears no biological connection to him. He spoke for 20 minutes. He cited precedent. He questioned timelines. He cast doubt like a man scattering fog. Then Camille stood. She did not raise her voice. She did not perform. She simply opened her binder and began. First, Peter Voss's notarized statement, supported by the physical pendant, which had been authenticated by an independent gemologist. One pendant, one commission, one client, no duplicates existed. Second, Harriet Loomis's sworn affidavit, corroborated by a video deposition recorded 3 days earlier. On the screen, Harriet described Pemberton's phone call word by word. Her voice shook but did not stop. The courtroom was silent. Third, the financial trail, the shell company, the wire transfer of $750,000, the law firm that served no client except the Hargrove Family Trust. Fourth, Lenora Hale's records, the case folder labeled Hargrove, January 2014, the instruction letter on trust letterhead. Fifth, Sergeant Vickers' statement, the man with the gold signet ring at the fire station. Sixth, the ACS casework override, traced through 4 layers of bureaucracy to an office connected to the Hargrove Family Trust Board. Seventh, Vivian Hargrove's voluntary statement to the Manhattan DA, in which she admitted signing the placement authorization letter. 7 pieces, 7 nails. Camille laid each one with the calm precision of a carpenter who knows exactly where the hammer must fall. Then she called her final witness. Dr. Niles Pemberton walked to the stand like a man walking to his own funeral, gray-faced, hollow-eyed. His attorney had negotiated limited immunity in exchange for testimony. He had nothing left to protect except the truth he had swallowed 12 years ago. Camille asked him one question at a time, small questions, quiet questions, each one a step deeper into the grave he had dug for himself. Did you receive a phone call on the night of January 16th, 2014? Yes. Who called you? Cordell Hargrove. What did he tell you? Pemberton closed his eyes. The courtroom held its breath. He told me to manage the situation. He said the mother was not part of the family's plan. He said to let nature take its course. And what did you understand that to mean? I understood that I was not to intervene. I was to let her bleed. A sound moved through the courtroom, not a gasp, but something lower, a collective exhale of horror that had been held for too long. And the baby? He told me to contact Lenora Hale, to have the child placed privately, permanently, outside any system that could trace her back to the family. Did you do this? Yes. Camille let the silence sit. 3 seconds. 5. 7. Then she turned to the judge. Your Honor, the petitioner requests immediate authorization for DNA testing. Whitford Keene stood to object. Judge Thornton raised one hand, a small gesture that carried the weight of a gavel. Sit down, Mr. Keene. He sat. The judge authorized the test. A rush analysis was completed in 72 hours by an accredited laboratory under court supervision. The result? 99.9998% probability that Ellison Hargrove was Zuri Okafor's biological father. Judge Thornton read the result into the record. The courtroom was still. Ellison sat motionless in his chair. Then, slowly, he turned and looked across the room at Zuri. She was already looking at him. She had been looking at him the entire time. She nodded. One small nod. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement. I see you. I believe you. We are connected. Ellison's composure broke. Not dramatically, silently. Tears ran down his face, and he did not wipe them away. 12 years of searching, of grief, of locked nursery doors and empty velvet boxes, all of it released in a single, quiet flood. Judge Thornton issued her orders. Full parental rights were restored to Ellison Hargrove, with a supervised transition plan that respected Zuri's bond with Dot Simmons. Referral of criminal charges against Cordell Hargrove, Vivian Hargrove, and Dr. Niles Pemberton to the Manhattan DA. Conspiracy, medical negligence resulting in death, child abandonment, and obstruction of justice. A formal ACS investigation into the misuse of casework overrides. Cordell stood when the judge finished. For the first time in his life, he had nothing to say. His attorney whispered something. Cordell did not respond. He walked toward the door and was met by federal marshals. The U.S. Attorney's Office had filed parallel charges: wire fraud, conspiracy. The signet ring on his right hand caught the courtroom light as they led him away. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. The crowd parted as Zuri walked down the steps with Dot on one side and Ellison on the other. At the bottom of the steps, a woman stood alone. Colette Branford, the woman from the gala. The woman who had called Zuri a street rat. She stood frozen, watching the girl she had tried to throw out walk past her like a queen. Zuri saw her. Their eyes met. Zuri did not stop. She did not speak. She simply held Colette's gaze for 3 steady seconds, and then looked forward. She didn't need to say a word. The silence said everything. But justice in a courtroom is only the beginning. Laws can punish. Verdicts can vindicate. But only love, patient, stubborn, terrifying love, can heal what was broken. And for Ellison and Zuri, the hardest part was not the trial. The hardest part was learning how to be father and daughter. 12 years too late, with 12 years of damage between them. That story begins now. Zuri did not move into Ellison's penthouse. She refused, quietly, firmly, in the way she did everything. Dot is my grandmother, she said. She chose me when nobody else did. I'm staying with her. Ellison did not argue. He did not bargain. He simply nodded. And the next week, he rented the apartment next door to Dot's in Brownsville. He did not send movers with expensive furniture. He came himself, carrying boxes. He painted the walls. He fixed the radiator that had rattled for 6 years. And when he noticed that the building's hallway lights had been broken since before Zuri could walk, he bought the entire building, quietly, without press, without cameras, and hired contractors to repair every code violation that Zuri had once documented in her composition notebook. The girl who had slipped evidence under an inspector's door watched as her evidence finally came to life. Every cracked pipe, every broken smoke detector, every patch of mold. Fixed. Not by the system, but by a father trying to earn back the years he had lost. Dot and Ellison circled each other carefully at first, like two people sharing a kitchen for the first time. She taught him how Zuri took her tea, 2 sugars, 1 ice cube, stirred exactly 7 times. He funded Dot's arthritis treatment at a specialist she could never have afforded. They disagreed about bedtimes. They argued about screen time. They sat together at the kitchen table on Sunday mornings while Zuri read, and slowly, awkwardly, beautifully, they became a family. Not a perfect family, not a storybook family, a real one. 3 months later, Ellison established the Adeze Okafor Foundation. Its mission? Fighting maternal mortality among black women, a crisis that claims lives at 3 to 4 times the rate of white women in the United States. Zuri served on the Youth Advisory Board. At the foundation's inaugural event, a photograph of Adeze hung behind the podium, radiant, laughing, one hand resting on her pregnant belly. Zuri stood before that photograph for a long time. Her fingers found the pendant around her neck, the half moon, the constellation, the garnet star. "Hi, Mom," she whispered. "They tried to erase you. It didn't work." 6 months after the trial, on a clear autumn night, Zuri sat at her desk. The same room, the same apartment, but now there were bookshelves lining the walls and a telescope by the window, pointed at Orion. She opened her composition notebook to a blank page. "My name is Zuri Adeze Okafor Hargrove. I was lost, but I was never unclaimed. My mother named me before I was born. My father searched for me before I could walk. And the woman who raised me loved me before she knew my story. I was not forgotten. I was fought for." She closed the notebook. She looked through the telescope. Orion was bright tonight, every star in its place, including the red one she had always imagined as her own, the garnet heart of the constellation, her mother's birthstone, her father's promise, her proof. Real talk, this one broke me. A kid nobody wanted, and she was somebody's whole world the entire time? Man, just one person giving a damn changes everything. That's the lesson. If you felt that too, like, share, subscribe. More stories coming. Next one hits even harder.